Hey guys, my name's Taylor, and like Dr. Park said, I am on staff with Briarwood, and I help to lead an international student ministry that reaches out, I guess, to international students throughout the city. So we have got students, from UAB, Samford, Jeff State, Birmingham Southern. Um, and I started this job about 2 years ago, and when I started it, Charles Daniel was not one of the first people I met. And that's because Charles doesn't necessarily do ministry with a microphone. But everywhere he goes, he does ministry. And Charles is a servant. Um, and the more I got to know the ministry, the more I saw how Charles has been used in it. And so one of the things that I loved when we started was this like Friday night Bible study that we had at someone's home where, every week we'd have about 35 or 40 people that would gather, students, and where we cook a meal and essentially just run a Bible study for them. And, came to find out that had started 20 years prior by Charles when he was a student himself at UAB. So he's just someone who, wherever he is, he's going to be doing ministry. When he was at UAB as an international student, he was doing ministry. I know in his job now he does ministry in his. He's involved with the Indian community here in Birmingham and helps to gather all the Indian families together. So he's just a servant, and serves very steadily, and I'm very thankful for him. And so he has my respect, and I hope that he has your guys' ears. He does have a tie to Beeson. His brother graduated from here back in probably about 2003, and is now Reuben Daniel, and is now serving as a missionary in Malaysia. So Charles his family's originally from Malaysia, but of Indian descent. So I'm excited for you guys to get to hear from Charles.
Can you all hear me? Thank you. Thank you so much for that kind words, Taylor. Glad to be here in your midst today. I was debating this topic for a few weeks, encountering Christ through international ministry. So when I thought about this deeply, what better way can I share is to use me as an example and use what I went through as an international student and today and beyond, right? So I want to step back. The only way you can get involved in an international ministry is to know a student or a person from where they are from, what their origins are, and their culture and those backgrounds. So because of that, I'm going to use me as an example to all of you today. So I'm going to go back and give you my background as a starting point. So without any delays, the groundwork. Okay, so my focus area here today is grace of God, right? I wouldn't be here if not for His grace. And I am not the most perfect person. I may have done a lot of mistakes and whatever not. But because God is so good, He had allowed me to stand in front of you today. On the other hand, now it propels us to share His love to one another. So I will leave you with this verse in our mind. Everybody know this. New commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you, and you are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you love for one another. So let me take you to a little journey to Asia. Now, this is a little condensed version of the map, and Malaysia, as you can see, is right down here. It's two parts of a country, and because of its unique strategically located, it's right in between India and China. So a lot of traders from in the past stopped in Malaysia for trade purposes and settled down, and we also had a lot of European sojourners who stopped, like the Portuguese and the Dutch and the British, in Malaysia and became a cosmopolitan part of Asia. So if you go down there, you will see many different people groups, many different language, culture that live in one multiracial society. So that is the kind of an environment that I grew in. Now let me go to the next slide here. This is a little bit of a closer look of that part of the world. As you can see, there's many different cities and countries that you may have heard before. Singapore is one of them. And of course, I come from a little town called Ipoh, that IPOH. That's the town that I grew up. It's very serene, filled with mountains, and the beach is about an hour away from where we lived. And throughout my entire growing age was filled with lots of adventurous trips to the wilderness. So in some ways it's almost like Birmingham, where we see the mountains so much. That's how it was. Now, giving you a little bit of an understanding, like I said, there's a lot of different people groups in one nation. This is the majority of the people. You'll see some ancestry from China, somebody from India, and then these are the Malay people who live in one society together. We speak different languages, we have different food, music, and culturally slightly different from each other, but yet we come together as one country. Now, to give you a little bit of a perspective, what we are dealing with, obviously we have many different religions. I do not know if there's any one nation has the most number of public holidays due to religious holidays. Maybe Dr. Parks can tell that for sure. Malaysia has the most number of holidays. So we have the Muslim, which is the largest religion. And then the Christians fall under right below 10% of the population, which predominantly are different people group. It could be an Indian ancestry, it could be a Chinese, could be some indigenous people too. Now, why I'm giving you all this feedback is so that I can take you back to me as a potential student to the United States. Who am I? So, if you look at my name, you may think I'm related to Charlie Daniels, but this is my given name. Many people in Asia identify their religious affinity by giving their children an Anglo or a Hebrew name, and that's kind of what I inherited. My parents, I come from a Christian home, and growing up in a childhood, we come from a little town. We didn't have much, but we had the most happiest childhood as I can recall. My parents were both believers. They were involved in church. So we had a little bit of fun activities at home with my siblings. And like most of you, I had one or two people that I looked up for who actually opened some doors as a growing child. One of them was my grandfather. He was a missionary from India. He moved maybe when he was a teenager, and then he came to Malaysia and became a missionary there, did a lot of work, but I only got to know him when he was 88 years old and I was 15. For the first time, I really got to hear him speak, and I was really interested to hear somebody at that age could memorize the scriptures, talked all the things that God had done in his life, and it was all simple things, nothing extravagant. We do not need to do anything big to reach somebody, but be a simple person. That's kind of what the takeaway I got out of him. And he imparted a lot of scripture verses to me. And then I had an aunt who was a godly lady who taught me so much as a growing child how to live. So I had within this circle of family, I had a lot of this good things coming to me. And then in a little town, we all find getaway, and this is before internet or social media, any distraction that we have today. So the church became the ground for a lot of this learning. So I got involved at a very young age in our local church. That is where I learned so many things, all life skills, good, bad, everything. But you learn how to be a leader. You learn how to pick up an instrument and play. You learn some biblical knowledge. All those things were given when I was growing up at that area. So, talking about faith, it's an assurance of things that you hope for, but the conviction of things not seen. At that time, in my little world that I grew up, I did not know what it meant because I have not experienced the real essence of faith. And it's a little picture of my granddad doing his mission work in some rural village. This picture has been in our home for like, I don't know, for many years, but the interesting part is the man next to him is Reverend Peter Young, who was a pastor from Britain. They both went to many different towns and cities and preached the gospel. Now, 20 years later, I came to the United States, I came to school here, and one of the people I met at my international student ministry, who was a past missionary, she was an elderly woman, and we got into talking, and she said, back in 1950, I was in Malaysia, doing missions work, and I met this wonderful couple who were like my parents, and we were close friends, and I'm still in touch with his wife. And guess who it was? Reverend Peter Young. So it's like I'm coming from that part of the world, coming all the way to Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm meeting somebody who knows this man who's next to my granddad. So, all right. So at one point, as I became a teenager, this is where my faith is being tested, I would say. So I applied for a bunch of schools here to the United States. 5 of them I think. Those were the days when you don't have any internet, you don't know what cities or schools look like. We had a booklet, I think Patterson Guide, that you flip through and see a small passage about the school and how much it costs and a little picture of the school. That's all we could imagine from. So I applied a few schools and I made my decision. This is back in 1994, so I made my decision based upon Forrest Gump, watching in the cinema. And he talked about Alabama, and I said, okay, why not? It won't be that bad. So I came to, so I applied and went to Mobile, University of South Alabama. And I'm giving you a perspective, a viewpoint of an international student with no friends, no family, no idea where they are coming. So it took me, that's the first time I'm flying out of my country. I've never flown before. And they stopped in San Francisco for a short stop, and then we stopped in Memphis, Tennessee for the next stop. At Memphis, Tennessee, my first culture shock was I saw many Elvis look-alike. So my impression was maybe Memphis is, everybody wants to look like Elvis. But later on, I found out it was his birthday weekend, and there was some show going on in Graceland. So anyway, I came to Mobile, and it was a new environment, first time away from home. And those days, we did not have any cell phone. To make a phone call back home cost us a minute was $1.50. So there was no chance of calling home and talking for a long time. I was struggling with accents. I thought I knew English, but no, I did not. I was struggling with idioms. All I could hear from my professors was Mr. Daniel, and I knew I was in trouble because I did not know what he was asking. And this was my first few weeks in the United States. Keeping up with school was a challenge, trying to figure out the new environment, new system, new language in my education system. And one more other thing, the climate. Malaysia was, we grew up, we do not know what natural disaster is. We may get some torrential rain or some flooding, but there's no natural disaster at all that I know of. So we had hurricanes in Mobile. Everybody's on curfew, and you got to be indoors. Malaysian students had a cookout that night most of the time, just that we did not know what it was. Understanding the currency exchange, price changes, learning how to do grocery shopping. We take things for granted. These are things that real stuff. Students who do not know, they have never seen a huge supermarket, to go aisle by aisle and figure out what things are and how expensive they are. So it took a lot of time for us to learn all of this, but most of all, building friends. That is the most difficult part, coming uprooted from your environment into a new environment. You want to make friends. You want to share what you know and speak out to others, right? So that was a challenge. And somebody told us, hey, there is a church nearby at Mobile that has an international student Sunday school. And we took the ride and I joined them. I went to Cottage Hill Baptist Church. That was the first time I'm going to a church. Great place, got to meet some real neat people, got involved in their Sunday school. And as we were doing that, I remember this, my roommates, we had two other roommates who were also fellow Malaysians. For the sake of not giving out the real name, I'm going to use some fake name. So Tom, who is also from an Indian descent from Malaysia, was my roommate. He grew up kind of like me from a Christian home. And John, who is a Chinese descent from Malaysia, who's not a believer. And so Tom and I decided maybe once a week we should just get together and have a little fellowship together in our apartment. So we would just sing a song and say our prayers and we talk and discuss. And John felt left out the first week and then he decided to join us. So now John, Tom, and I are having this little fellowship. Lo and behold, it was not Tom or myself who did this, but John, who was not a believer, felt so encouraged. He went out and started recruiting his buddies into our home. So now, from three of us, it started growing to the fourth person, who was a Singaporean lady. And then it kind of grew. Our apartment, which was a small apartment, we were hosting 45 students in our home in Mobile, in the Four Seasons apartment complex, on a Friday night. It was the best thing ever. The reason is it was very simple. We did not do anything big or crazy. We just had a wonderful time. Everybody brought some covered dish. We could enjoy different cuisine from different ethnicity. We spoke to each other. The next thing is we'll have a singspiration, we'll have a little bit of a sharing time, prayer time, and it's just a great time to have a fellowship. So that kind of grew a little bit more because there were so many missionaries who would walk around our apartment complex, and as they hear us sing, they will just knock on the door and just come and join us. So we met some folks from, there was a person, Brother Carson, Brother Miller, all those people will come and join us and be part of that fellowship. So even all these great things that was going on in a new environment, and my background being a believer, I experienced difficulties. It was the first time ever I felt that I really need God in a personal level, not necessarily all these great activities and all the leadership qualities. That was not it. It's your personal relationship that needed to be had. And that was my biggest test in my life. And because you're alone, and I did not know what my future looks like, I didn't know where I'm heading. There were so many uncertainties. So I started depending on God. And as an international student myself, I encountered Christ in an unimaginable way during that time. So the next phase in my life was to further my education. I came to UAB, which is here in Birmingham. Best thing that ever happened to me, I believe. So as soon as I got into UAB, I wanted to go and get myself involved. An international house at UAB hosted a lot of international students. I got to know the director real well. I volunteered to be part of that team to onboard and be friend with a lot of students. It was a great time. And this was the time that I exposed to learn different cultures and people and respect their language. I mean, I would go learning some phrases in Swahili. I mean, it was such beautiful language. I couldn't resist not wanting to understand that language. So you can expound yourself to a different environment by wanting to know someone's music or food or their culture, because those are things that people want to share about themselves to each other, right? So that was my first avenue that I got involved. So every time we had new students into UAB through this iHouse, we'll have a huge, about the first 1 week of before school starts, we'll host it in my house where I used to live in Southside in a huge Victorian house It had enough room for us to have a little cookout and different cultures and get to know people. So during that time, I also wanted to get connected to some local churches. I found a booklet that had some phone numbers and get connected. And one of them incident was when I got connected through with Briarwood. Now Briarwood had a on-campus office nearby, and so it was convenient that I could walk from my apartment to it. So this is how it happened. I actually called and left a message with somebody at the Briarwood office, and 3 days later, I got a call back from the person in charge of international student ministry, kind of like Taylor. He was then at that time, and he called and he said, "Are you Charles Daniel?" I said, "Yes." Can we meet today? He said he wanted to meet me right away, and luckily, as a student, you don't have much to do. So I said, "Okay, I have some time, and we'll meet." So he said, "I was out in a conference in Colorado last week, and I met a Malaysian student there, and he said, I need to come and look for you." And he gave me your name, and I came to my office this morning, and as before I could even open anything, and I saw your name with your phone number on my desk. So this must be some way we got connected that way. So through him, I experienced something different as an international student. He exposed me to a lot of good things. My walk with God was much deeper. We met at least once a week to pray, but I also met a lot of missionaries. I had no idea what missionaries' life was about until I got acquainted through this group, because we met a lot of missionaries who had lived in different parts of the world, served God faithfully for 20, 30 years, and then they come and they were in Birmingham almost in their retirement years, but they were still part of the missions work through international student ministry. So I learned a lot of things from them. One of those things that they introduced me was topical memory verse. It was a little card system that we memorized scriptures on a weekly basis. And I don't have any of them today, but the memory is still there. I remember all those verses, and I'm teaching it to my children. So how beautiful it is to impact others by giving something like that. So I got all of these things from them. They even had a lesson on discipleship. I had no idea formal learning of discipleship. So during that time, I'm learning everything while I'm a student, I'm being exposed to all these different things. And while we were doing that, that's when we started talking about, let's organize some fellowship, fun game, and we did that. It went very successful, and then it became on a weekly fellowship thing that became the Friday night fellowship. And Anne Lindsay, who was part of this international student ministry team, she's a fantastic cook. Her husband, Dr. Russell, was a godly man. I've never seen anybody quite as strong as them. They were willing to open their home and say, let's have this fellowship in our home. We'll have it. And for the next, God knows, 25, 30 years later, they still faithfully had it every week in their home. Now, I know time is a senescence, so I want to make sure that I cover everything properly. So this is, like everybody else, see, you must understand, international students will come to school. They will have a certain period of time, 3, 4 years, maybe 7 years, if they did their doctorate program, whatever it is. After that, they are going somewhere else. So your best chance to befriend somebody, to have this relationship, is that while they are there in the same town as you are. So that same thing happened to me. I finished and I graduated. I got a job and I went to Seattle. And then I moved around all over the United States. My work and a new lifestyle took precedence in some way. For about 8.5 years, I was out of Alabama. And so this is the time I'm encountering Christ in different ways, different challenges, in different circumstances, but all in a good way, right? So as I'm doing that, this thing doesn't really happen to 90% of international students, but it happened to me. The job that I was in, the company that I worked for, brought me back to Birmingham. As this time in a different level, I'm coming in as a professional. I got a job and have a newly married, settling up with a family. But my first connection and affiliation was, hey, let me go to this group that I was part of one time. And lo and behold, I was immediately connected. And uh, these are some of the examples of programs that's happening around Briarwood International Student Ministry. We have airport pickup for students who show up at the airport for the first time. You're greeting them and getting to know them. We intentionally have a weekly, once a month grocery shopping. You take them to a grocery store and let them go grab some things. Rides to UAB, from UAB to the church for Sunday school, Friday night Bible study that I mentioned in the Lindsay's house, beach trips. Once a year we had beach trips, picnics. These were some of the avenues that all those things are happening. And now I'm being part of it. I could see both sides as a student, what I went through, and here the ministry itself, how it's moving. So I was part of the Briarwood International Outreach team. We met and saw so many lives. It's unbelievable. I can go stories telling so many students how they were transformed. I am deeply fortunate to come from a believing home, and I knew my way and how to get to the church. Not everybody's like that. Majority of the students, they do not know Christ. They don't know anything. And for them to be part of it and getting involved, having the thirst to want to grow more and finally accept Christ, it's fantastic. So I'll give a quick example of um, one student that I know very well, and he was in UAB and we needed a ride to Sunday school. And that was my turn that Sunday, and I went over there and met him, drove him all the way to church. He and I talked a little bit, and he come from the same part of the world where I come from too, not necessarily the same country. But we talked a little bit, and then he went back. He somehow got connected to this international student ministry, and he got engaged a little bit. He'll start coming to Friday night fellowship, and he started reading the scriptures. I've never seen anybody memorize the scriptures as good as he was. He had a photographic memory. And he became a believer, he got baptized, and he wanted to do seminary. And today he's actually in a seminary. He had a lot of difficulties with his home, but then he made it. The good story that I can tell you is people's lives get transformed. And we have not done anything to change them, but to show the love of God. And I think that is the baseline here to expound. Now, serving international students can go beyond international students. So this is where my wife and I, we talked about, we have young children today. We are very much involved and attuned to international ministry, and we are still serving our local church at Briarwood. But then we found a lot of families in town who either from a Christian home, or they're just Indian origin, they are willing to have a fellowship. So we started this fellowship with few other families together, and we congregate once a month. We have a good food and fellowship and have a time of prayer and fellowship. It's going well. This is a one way for us to reach out to one another and see what can God do. By doing this, I'm hoping and praying that our children now will also experience and get involved in this type of ministry. And that's kind of what it's a transitional thing. So how my grandfather did his work, and it came to my parents, and I learned something, and I'm trying to promote my children to do something where they can bring the word of God to the next generation. And for all of you as students, this is a perfect opportunity for you to, you may see somebody on campus that may not have much, anybody talking to them. You can say hi and get to know them, but the best way is to befriend somebody, because all of us yearn for some friendship. That's kind of what my takeaway is. And lastly, So, understanding international student ministry. So, it's very simple. Just know who you are, reach out to somebody if you want to impact God in their lives. And how can you reach? Find a local ministry if you want to, or if you don't need to, you can be the church yourself and do the best you can, uh, get to know somebody. Um, and then, what is our purpose in life and the goal? To me, to share the love of God and preach the gospel. And I just thought I'll share with you a little bit of my family. My dad, he's 86 right now, the one with the cap though. He's a pastor in Malaysia. My mom is next to him. They both actually do some work with um, broken home children, with little children. So it's a neat ministry. And my brother, who went to school here, he's got a mission there in a church back in Malaysia, and my wife next to him. And that time we had a set of twins. We have third child now. Um, and that's the end. But before, before we ask, do you all have any questions for me?
If you have questions, then I'm going to repeat the question in the microphone so that people in the other room can hear it and so that it can be heard on the recording. Okay?
What did you go to school for and what job brought you back here?
Okay, so the question is what did you go to school for and what job brought you back?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I did not speak much about myself. Yes, I went to UAB and did industrial distribution, which was a program between School of Engineering and School of Business. I was always interested in the technical aspect of things, but I also wanted to connect to the business world all the while. So I started out my career uh, with sales engineering, and then I started out as an engineer and finally got into project management and in the construction world for 10 plus years. And then last 12 years I worked for Southern Company in the R&D part of Southern Company. So we think about future utilities and stuff like that as a project manager. Thank you.
Anyone else? Sure.
As far as like international students coming to America, what were like the primary avenues that you could get connected through? So was church kind of just like the main option, or as far as international students go, what are the I guess options for getting involved and actually like getting connected and building friendships? Are there a lot of avenues, or is it just the church?
No? So there are.
I'm sorry, I have to repeat the question so that the others can hear. So he's asking, what are the avenues to be able to get connected to internationals? Is it just through church, or are there other ways you can get connected to them as well?
So the best avenue I would say is through your local college. If you have a student-based college and you see internationals, and they may be part of some activity within the international student groups, that is one way. There are local ethnic things that takes place. If there is an event that's taking place, it's usually for the public. It's open. You can meet some folks during that time. Most of the time, you will find that most internationals are friendly. They are interested in sharing their ideas and their thoughts, and they are like everybody else. So it's very simple to make friends, in my opinion. So those are the few avenues I would consider, thinking that it's easy, where you will find some people.
I used to work in a lab at a university, and it was filled with different ethnicities of professors. And do you have any recommendations for kind of meeting people who aren't students, who might be just around the city in different places?
Yes, yeah, good question. So the question is, do you have any recommendations for meeting people who are internationals from the countries that are not students? They're immigrants. They're working a job, or they're doing something very different than being a student.
Great. So there are many places. One area, usually most internationals tend to congregate in different subdivisions or neighborhood. In my thought process, I think Westavian, who is the predominant internationals who live, and they have different neighborhoods in that areas. But if you go to any local grocery store, international grocery store, you're going to find a lot of them out there. Okay, you'll get to know somebody. If you want to know some spices, it's a good way to ask somebody. There are some local events that takes place. I don't know about Samford, but I know UAB has some international cultural events that takes place once a year for multiple different culture, either Chinese culture or Indian culture or European culture. They have different programs, and usually they are open for public. So those are the areas that you can meet a lot of not just students, but a lot of people, professionals tend to come for those kind of programs.
Just to back up, one of the things that he said, our Dean Sweeney recently moved into a neighborhood that has a lot of employees from UAB who are international. And so that's very common. Go ahead.
How do you encourage international Christians who are living in Birmingham now to engage in international ministry?
That is a very tough
Wait,
question.
sorry, I'm sorry. I have to get the question again. You said, how do you get international Christians?
Yes.
Okay. So the question is, how do you get international Christians to engage in international ministry in the city?
That's a question that I always struggled with. We have so much of distraction in this day and age, too many things out there. And as international students, just students, forget about Christians, but just students, there are so many temptation. I mean, you want to get involved here and there and all those things. Now, as Christians, we also have a lot of differences. So one way, in my opinion, is if you're friends with them and if you know them well, maybe have a dinner together in one of your apartments. Have a one-on-one or 1, 2, or 3 gathering together. Have without even having any type of preconceived plan, but come together as, hey, let's have dinner, the 3 of us or 4 of us. As you do that, you're going to build a relationship. As you build a relationship, the easiest way for you to build that relationship when they are also believers, so you can have the common conversation together. When you do that, then you will see it taking somewhere. That's just my impression. Not everybody is going to go with you or wanting to be part of, but we can only try.
Any more? Okay.
With COVID-19, it's been incredibly difficult for any college student, but especially, I'm assuming, internationals. Is there any advice as far as just ministry that we can do, especially like people who are arriving during the time of COVID, as far as that goes?
So the question is, how do you minister to internationals during the time of this time of COVID-19, especially as they arrive? How do you get to know them?
Yeah, it is very new to us. This is our new norm. I do not know how many students have arrived this last semester in the fall, but the one avenue is everybody is using social distancing. I would say that most international students are very well versed with that principle, wearing mask and keeping clean, all those things. Now, before we experienced it here, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we have already experienced it in Asia. So people are kind of used to this thing, and they knew what to expect out of this. So they will be well versed with it. How do you minister to them? I think by phone, we check on them, like we do to our friends and families. Call them on And also, I think that there is some sort of a support system you can offer to find out if they have food and whatnot. So that is one way if you know them.
And I would just add, in terms of getting to know them, some of the international students that we've gotten to know through our church and our family group at home, some of it has been other international students we already knew, connecting with them. And so it was just kind of reaching through the network and just invite it. We have them in our backyard for meals. And so there are ways to still get together. All right, time for one more question.
Also, can you talk a little bit more about your grandfather and how he became a Christian and maybe his role in getting to Malaysia from India and what part of India he hailed from? I would love to go a little more about that.
Thank you.
So I was asking him to hear more about his grandfather. And by the way, I loved the picture that the missionary was holding the umbrella and your grandfather was speaking. I liked that. That was great.
Thank you. Uh, I think we owe it to the British missionaries who came to India, South India particularly, and preached the gospel. And my grandfather and his father, from what I know, became believers for the first time. And they embraced it very well. They wanted to know more. My grandfather was a violinist, so he played violin like a professional. I've never seen anybody play like that. But because of that, the missionaries in Britain took him over to Malaysia as a missionary and preach the gospel in the form of playing the music as well as reaching out to the locals over there. And so that is how he came. He was 20 years old back in 1920 when he traveled. Those days, there's no flight, so you had to take the ship from India all the way to Malaysia. And he went through his time. He used to tell me he has seen 2 world wars. And fair enough, World War I and World War II. And he experienced, like any international students, moving out of his home base and then go to another country and going through all that motion. But the beauty is he embraced God at a very young age, so he went all out. So he worked for Bible Society of Malaysia, and that time it was in Singapore based. So he gave out Bibles to many, many people. This is back in 1988. He was 88 years old. And I mean, when your grandfather tells you something, sometimes you kind of question, is it true? I mean, can this be really real, what he's talking about? And we see people coming from different areas in the country, and they say, we wanted to stop by and wanted to say thank you because of him, we are believers today, and this is what happened. And so he lived up to 101, a ripe old age. But I've never seen anybody memorize the scriptures and preaching it to you. I mean, I was just a grandson sitting down there, and he will just tell me, how does a young man keep his ways pure? And I'm like, what is he talking about? So he was like that, a big guy, he will speak with authority, but he knew the word so well. I'll give you one last segment. This is how beautiful our life can be. When he died, I was here in the United States, but my parents told me this. He was 101 when he passed away. The pastor of the local church was out of town. So they had to go and find somebody who's nearby church. And this man came up there as he was in the pulpit preaching, and with his tearful eyes, he said, this man here gave me my first Bible when I was 10 years old. If not for him, I wouldn't be here standing. So that is the power of the gospel. You have a complete circle. You give out. Someday, somebody is reaching it and coming back to you and saying, I actually became a believer because of you. So that's the story.
Okay. I actually am going to ask the last question. I feel like I'm taking a little bit of a chance here. What does your shirt mean?
What is that?
Your shirt.
I knew I'm going to get asked on that. I have no idea. I was in a tech conference a few years ago, and this was one of the t-shirt. It was a data conference, so there must be some data, something to say with data. So,
I had to ask. It's going to be on video, you know. So, all right. Hey, thanks everyone for coming. You are dismissed.
thank you all.